Captain Veltar's crystalline fingers danced across the control panel of the research vessel. Peaceful inquiry. The gentle blue glow from his translucent skin reflected off the smooth surfaces of the bridge, creating dancing patterns of light that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Today, however, his light pulsed with anxiety. "Sensor reading complete, Captain," reported his science officer, Kylan, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of their species. "The nebula contains 17 previously unknown mineral formations. The xenobiology department is quite excited." Veltar nodded, his head bobbing on his elongated neck. The Zephyrians had been exploring space for 3 centuries, always in the name of knowledge and peaceful discovery. Their homeworld of Zephyr Prime was a paradise of low gravity, gentle breezes, and crystal formations that sang in harmonic frequencies. Violence was nearly unknown to their species. "Excellent work, Kylan. Begin detailed scans of the proximity alarm shattered the peaceful atmosphere. Red lights flooded the bridge, causing every Zephyrian present to shield their sensitive eyes. Veltar's bioluminescent patches flared in shock. "Captain!" The communications officer's voice cracked with fear. "Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Unknown configuration." On the main screen, nightmare shapes materialized against the starfield. The vessels looked like they had grown rather than been built. Twisted bone and metal formed hulls that pulsed with sickly organic rhythms. Acidic green light leaked from what might have been weapon ports. These ships were alive and they looked hungry. "By the crystal throne," Veltar whispered. "What are they?" His question was answered moments later when the lead vessel opened communication channels. The voice that emerged was not a voice at all, but a collective hissing that somehow formed words. "Soft things in metal shells. You will feed us well." The attacking ships moved with predatory grace. They did not fire weapons in the conventional sense. Instead, they spat streams of corrosive fluid that ate through the peaceful inquiry's shields like acid through paper. Boarding pods launched from the bioships, each one looking like a massive parasite seeking a host. "Defensive systems," Veltar ordered, though he knew their research vessel carried only the most basic protection. The Zephyrians had never needed more. In their 3 centuries of space travel, they had never encountered a species that would attack without provocation. The first boarding pod struck the hull with a wet, organic sound. Through the ship's sensors, they could hear drilling. No, not drilling, chewing. Whatever was in that pod was eating its way through their hull. "Captain, they're inside," engineering reported. "Section 7 is breached." The screaming started moments later. Veltar had never heard such sounds of terror and pain from his own people. Through the internal cameras, he watched in horror as creatures that defied description poured through the breach. They moved on too many legs with mouths full of rotating teeth. They grabbed Zephyrian crew members and simply began eating them alive. "All hands, retreat to the central sections," Veltar commanded. "Seal emergency bulkheads." More boarding pods struck the ship. More sections fell to the creatures. Veltar realized with crystalline clarity that his research vessel and everyone aboard would be consumed within the hour. These things, whatever they were, did not want territory or resources. They wanted food. "Living food, sir," Kylan said, her voice shaking. "I've been monitoring their communications. They call themselves the Scourge. They've been hunting ships in this sector for months. They don't take prisoners." Veltar looked around his bridge. Half his crew was already dead or missing. Emergency klaxons wailed as the ship's atmosphere leaked from dozens of breaches. The beautiful research vessel that had been his home for 5 years was being devoured around them. "Open all communication channels," he ordered. "Maximum power to the transmitter." "Sir?" "That will drain our remaining power," his communications officer warned. "Do it anyway." The transmitter powered up, sending signals across every known frequency. Veltar cleared his throat and began what he knew would be his final message. "This is Captain Veltar of the Zephyrian research vessel, Peaceful Inquiry. We are under attack by hostile entities called the Scourge. They are biological ships that consume other life forms. We are located at coordinates 77 Alpha 9 in the outer spiral. Any civilized species receiving this message, please help us." He paused as another section of his ship was breached. More screaming echoed through the corridors. "We are researchers, not warriors. We have no defenses against these creatures. They eat people alive. If anyone can hear this, please send help. We have families. We have children waiting for us to return home." The power levels dropped dangerously as the message broadcast on every frequency the Zephyrians had ever recorded. including the primitive radio waves used by a species from some backwater world called Earth. Veltar had read about humans in the Galactic database. They were listed as barely civilized Deathworlders from a high-gravity, high-radiation planet. Most species avoided them. "Broadcasting on all frequencies, Captain," his officer reported, "including the Deathworlder bands." "Good. Someone has to hear us." Through the bridge windows, Veltar could see more Scourge bioships arriving. This was not just an attack. It was a feeding frenzy. His beautiful, peaceful research mission had become a nightmare of teeth and acid. The main door to the bridge began to bubble and hiss. Something was eating through it from the other side. Veltar gathered his remaining crew into the center of the room and continued broadcasting. "This is Captain Veltar. If anyone receives this message, please remember us. Please remember that we tried to learn about the universe peacefully. Please stop these creatures from doing this to others." The door dissolved completely. Creatures poured through the gap, their multiple eyes focusing on the Zephyrians with predatory hunger. Veltar closed his eyes and hoped his message would reach someone, anyone who could make a difference. The transmission continued to broadcast even as the bridge fell silent. Across the galaxy, the desperate plea of a peaceful research captain spread through space, reaching the communication arrays of dozens of species. Most who heard it marked it as another tragedy of deep space exploration. The universe was dangerous, and sometimes expeditions simply vanished. Such was the cost of reaching into the unknown. But on a small blue world in a system marked only as Sol 3, Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Fleet sat up in her chair as the translated message played through her command center speakers. Her jaw tightened as she listened to the description of the creatures called the Scourge. "Ma'am," her communications officer said quietly, "should we log this with the other distress calls we can't respond to?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, listening to the terror in the alien captain's voice. Then she stood up and walked to the tactical display. "No," she said firmly. "Send a fleet-wide alert. All ships prepare for immediate departure." Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the human battleship Indomitable, watching the translation software work through the desperate alien message for the third time. Her weathered face showed no emotion, but her hands clenched into fists as she listened to Captain Veltar's terrified voice describing creatures that ate people alive. "How long ago was this transmission sent?" she asked her communications officer, Lieutenant Rodriguez. 18 hours, Admiral. The signal traveled through 3 relay stations before reaching our deep space monitors. 18 hours. The research ship was almost certainly gone by now. But Chen had been in space long enough to know that sometimes miracles happened. Sometimes people survived longer than anyone thought possible. "Navigation, plot a course to these coordinates. Maximum burn." "Admiral," her tactical officer interrupted, "that's deep in uncharted space. We'd be alone out there if we run into trouble." Chen turned to face her bridge crew. These were good people, experienced officers who had served with her through the Centauri conflict and the mining guild wars. They trusted her judgment, but she could see the concern in their eyes. "Let me tell you what we just heard," she said calmly. "A research ship full of peaceful scientists was attacked by creatures that eat people alive. They sent out a distress call asking for help from any civilized species. Any civilized species." She walked to the main display showing the galactic map. Earth sat in a small corner, marked with the yellow designation that meant Caution Deathworld Species. For 300 years, the galaxy has treated humans like dangerous animals. They trade with us when they need something, but they don't trust us. They don't invite us to their councils or their peace conferences. We're the scary neighbors they try to ignore. Lieutenant Rodriguez nodded. Every human in space had experienced this treatment. They were tolerated, not welcomed. But today, Chen continued, when those scientists were dying, they sent their message to everyone, including us. They were so desperate they even asked the scary Deathworlders for help. She touched the communications panel. "Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're responding to an alien distress call. Then activate Protocol 7. The bridge fell silent. Protocol 7 was the Deathworlder defense doctrine, created after the first human ships had been attacked by space pirates. It was simple. When humans were threatened, every human ship within jump range would respond. "No exceptions, ma'am," the tactical officer said carefully. "Protocol 7 is for defending human assets. These are aliens." Chen looked at him steadily. Rodriguez, read me the first line of Protocol 7. The communications officer pulled up the document. No one fights alone. Does it say no human fights alone? Rodriguez checked again. No, ma'am. It says no one fights alone, Chen nodded. Send the activation code. All human ships, military and civilian, are to converge on these coordinates. Emergency override. Within minutes, the responses started coming in. The mining ship Rock Crusher was 3 days away but would make the jump. The colony transport New Horizon was closer and already changing course. Even the research station Galileo was scrambling its small defense fleet. Admiral, Rodriguez said, his voice filled with amazement. We're getting responses from everywhere. The cargo hauler heavy lifter is coming. So is the passenger liner Stardream. Even some of the independent traders are joining up. Chen smiled grimly. This was what other species never understood about humans. They saw the violence, the aggressive behavior, the way humans fought over resources and territory. What they missed was the other side of human nature. When someone was in trouble, humans responded. It did not matter if the victims were strangers or even aliens. How many ships total? She asked. Still getting responses, but it looks like over 200 vessels will converge on the target coordinates. 200 ships. Chen had never seen a human fleet that large outside of war games. Mining vessels, cargo ships, passenger transports, research stations, military vessels, and independent traders. Every category of human space vessel was represented. The indomitable jump to hyperspace, leading a growing stream of human ships toward the coordinates where Captain Veltar had sent his desperate plea. As they traveled, more ships joined the fleet. The message spread through human space networks faster than the military communication systems could handle. Ma'am, Lieutenant Rodriguez said, I'm getting reports from the outer colonies. People are volunteering to crew ships that don't even have full manning. The cargo hauler Big Betty launched with a crew of volunteers from a mining station. They've never been in a fight before, Chen understood. She had grown up on a farming world where neighbors helped neighbors no matter what. When she joined the fleet, she learned that space was bigger, but the principle remained the same. Humans took care of each other. Today they were taking care of aliens who had nowhere else to turn. Tactical analysis of the enemy, she ordered. Limited data, Admiral. The transmission mentioned biological ships and creatures that board and consume victims. No known weapon signatures or defensive capabilities. Chen frowned. Biological ships were rare but not unknown. Most species that used them were either very advanced or very primitive. The behavior described in the transmission suggested something primitive and aggressive. Combat doctrine recommendations? Her tactical officer consulted his database. For unknown biological entities, recommend standard hunter-killer tactics. Identify weak points, focus fire, prevent escape. Prevent escape, Chen repeated. That's important. If these things are hunting research ships, they're probably still in the area looking for more prey. The fleet traveled through hyperspace for 36 hours. During the journey, Chen received reports on the other ships joining her. The mining ship Rock Crusher had fabricated improvised weapons from their industrial equipment. The colony transport New Horizon had converted their cargo bays into fighter launch platforms. Even the passenger liner Stardream had armed their maintenance pods with construction tools that could double as weapons. Admiral, Rodriguez said as they prepared to drop out of hyperspace. The other ships are asking for orders. Chen looked at the tactical display showing the positions of over 200 human vessels. Mining ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, research vessels, and military craft, all flying together toward coordinates where aliens had died asking for help. Tell them this, she said. We're going to find these scourge creatures. We're going to rescue any survivors, and we're going to make sure this never happens to anyone else in this sector. She paused, thinking of Captain Veltar's terrified voice. And tell them that today, humanity keeps its promise. No one fights alone. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system where the peaceful inquiry had sent its final message. What they found there would change how the galaxy viewed humans forever. Captain Veltar huddled in the emergency shelter deep within the peaceful inquiry, listening to the sounds of his ship being devoured around him. 3 days had passed since the first attack. 3 days of hiding while the scourge creatures methodically consumed everything they could find. Most of his crew was gone. The lucky ones had died quickly. The others. Veltar tried not to think about the others. The emergency shelter's life support would last maybe 2 more days. After that, he would have to choose between suffocation and being eaten alive. Through the shelter's small porthole, he could see more Scourge bioships arriving. 7 of the massive creatures floated around his dying vessel, occasionally extending feeding tubes to suck out atmosphere, water, or organic matter. They were patient predators, content to drain their prey slowly. The proximity sensor suddenly activated, their gentle chime almost lost in the sound of grinding metal and organic feeding. Veltar crawled to the sensor display, hoping against hope that a rescue vessel had finally arrived. What he saw made him question his sanity. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace. Hundreds of them. They came in waves, materializing against the starfield in formations that spoke of military precision. But these were not the sleek, elegant vessels of the civilized galactic species. These ships were blocky, utilitarian, and covered in weapons that looked improvised but deadly. "By the Crystal Throne," Veltar whispered. "How many of them are there?" The lead vessels were clearly military, bristling with missile pods and energy weapons. Behind them came larger ships that looked like cargo haulers and mining vessels, but their hulls had been hastily modified with weapon mounts. Even further back, he could see passenger liners and research stations that had somehow been converted into warships. The communications system crackled to life. A human voice, speaking an accented but understandable galactic standard, filled the emergency shelter. "Unknown biological vessels. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Fleet. You are ordered to cease hostile actions immediately and withdraw from this system." The Scourge response was their typical collective hissing. "Soft metal things. You will feed us too." There was a moment of silence from the human fleet. Then Admiral Chen's voice returned, colder than deep space. "Negative. You will withdraw, or you will be destroyed." What happened next would be talked about in galactic military academies for generations. The human fleet did not attack in waves or formations. They attacked like a pack of predators, each ship moving independently but coordinated with deadly precision. The military vessels launched missiles while cargo haulers fired improvised weapons, and mining ships used their industrial equipment as siege cannons. The first Scourge bioship to die was the largest one. A converted mining vessel called the Rock Crusher flew directly at it, ignoring the streams of acid being fired in its direction. At the last moment, the mining ship fired its plasma bore, a tool designed to cut through asteroids. The beam sliced the bioship in half, spilling its contents into space. "Direct hit," came a cheerful voice over the communications. "This is Foreman Klaus on the Rock Crusher. One bug down, who wants the next one?" The Scourge, accustomed to prey that fled or surrendered, suddenly faced creatures that actively hunted them. A passenger liner called the Stardream had converted its maintenance pods into fighters. These small craft swarmed around the bioships like angry insects, firing construction tools that somehow became weapons of war. Veltar watched in amazement as a cargo hauler called the Heavy Lifter rammed one of the smaller Scourge vessels, its reinforced hull crushing the biological ship like an egg. The cargo hauler's crew cheered over the open channel as they backed away from the wreckage. But it was the military vessels that truly terrified the Scourge. The human battleship Indomitable moved through the bioships like a shark through a school of fish. Its weapons were precise and deadly, targeting the organic weak points that held each creature together. When a Scourge ship tried to flee, human fighters pursued it, hunting it down like wolves chasing wounded prey. "This is incredible," Veltar breathed. "They fight like, he searched for the right word. The civilized species fought with careful tactics, minimizing casualties and seeking diplomatic solutions. These humans fought like apex predators defending their territory. No, more than that. They fought like protectors defending their pack. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, 7 Scourge bioships were dead, their organic hulls floating in pieces around the peaceful inquiry. The human fleet had suffered minor damage to a few vessels, but no losses. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communications again. "This is the human fleet to the Zephyrian vessel. Are there any survivors aboard?" Veltar's hand shook as he activated his emergency transmitter. This is Captain Veltar. I'm alive. There may be others in the emergency shelters." "Understood, Captain. We're sending rescue teams. Please stand by." Within minutes, human vessels had docked with the peaceful inquiry. Veltar heard the sound of cutting tools as they opened paths through the damaged sections of his ship. Then the shelter door opened and he found himself facing his first human. The creature was shorter than Veltar but much broader, with thick bones and dense muscle. Its skin was dark and scarred, and its eyes held an intensity that made Veltar step backward. This was clearly a predator, evolved on a world where only the strong survived. "Captain Veltar?" the human asked in accented galactic standard. "I'm Commander Martinez, Human Fleet Marines. Are you injured?" "No," Veltar managed. "Just frightened," Commander Martinez nodded. "That's understandable. Those things were pretty nasty. We found 12 more of your people in other shelters. They're being evacuated to our medical bay." Veltar followed the human through the corridors of his ruined ship. Everywhere he looked, he saw evidence of the scourge feeding. But he also saw human rescue workers moving through the wreckage with practiced efficiency, searching for survivors and salvaging what could be saved. "Commander," Veltar said as they reached the docking port, "how did you know to come here?" Martinez looked surprised. "You sent a distress call." "We heard it, but we sent that call to everyone. The Galactic Council, the Trade Federation, the Science Coalition. No one responded." The human stopped walking and turned to face him. "Captain, I need you to understand something. When someone calls for help, humans respond. It doesn't matter if you're human or alien, friend or stranger. When you're in trouble, you're part of our pack." Veltar looked around at the human ships surrounding his vessel. Over 200 vessels, ranging from military battleships to passenger liners, all crewed by volunteers who had dropped everything to respond to a distress call from complete strangers. "Why?" he asked quietly. Commander Martinez smiled, showing teeth that reminded Veltar uncomfortably of a predator's fangs. "Because that's what humans do." As Veltar was helped aboard the rescue vessel, he realized that his people's first contact with humanity would change everything. The galaxy had always viewed humans as dangerous Deathworlders to be avoided. Now he understood that they were something far more terrifying. They were Deathworlders who cared. Captain Veltar sat in the medical bay of the human battleship Indomitable, still trying to process what had happened. 3 days ago, he had been a peaceful researcher studying nebula formations. Now he was the sole survivor of his command crew, rescued by an alien species that his people had barely acknowledged existed. The human doctor, a female called Dr. Sarah Kim, finished running her medical scanner over his crystalline form. Her movements were gentle, but Veltar could not help noticing the dense bone structure and powerful muscles that marked her as a creature evolved for violence. "You're in good health, Captain," Dr. Kim said in careful galactic standard. "Some stress fractures in your bioluminescent patches. Probably from fear responses, but they'll heal naturally." "Thank you, Doctor." Veltar hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering him. "How many of your people died rescuing us?" Dr. Kim looked puzzled. "None. We had some damaged ships, a few minor injuries when the cargo haulers got too close to those acid spitters, but no fatalities." Veltar stared at her. "But there were 7 Scourge bioships. Each one was larger than most galactic cruisers." "Yes," Dr. Kim agreed. "Admiral Chen said they were tough opponents. Took almost an hour to finish them all off." An hour. 7 massive bioships, each one capable of destroying a research fleet. Eliminated in less than an hour by humans who considered it a tough fight only because it took so long. The medical bay doors opened, and Admiral Chen entered. Veltar had seen her on the communication screen, but meeting her in person was different. She was not as physically imposing as the Marines, but something in her eyes suggested she was far more dangerous. "Captain Veltar," Admiral Chen said, extending her hand in what Veltar recognized as a human greeting gesture. "I'm sorry we didn't arrive in time to save more of your crew." Veltar touched her hand briefly, noting the calloused skin and strong grip. "Admiral, you saved 13 of us. Without your intervention, we would all be dead." "Still not good enough," Chen said firmly. "We should have been here sooner." She gestured to a nearby chair. "May I sit? I'd like to ask you some questions about these scourge creatures." As they talked, Veltar learned disturbing things about human nature. Admiral Chen was intensely interested in the scourge's tactics, their biology, their breeding patterns, and most importantly, their location. "You're planning to hunt them," Veltar realized. "Of course," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "We can't leave creatures like that alive to attack other research ships." "But Captain, they might be an intelligent species. Perhaps they can be reasoned with, educated to understand that sentient beings should not be consumed." Admiral Chen's expression hardened. "Captain, Did they respond to your attempts at communication with anything other than threats to eat you? Well, no, but then they've made their choice. Chen leaned forward. Let me explain something about human philosophy, Captain. We believe that every sentient being has the right to exist peacefully, but when someone violates that right, when they choose to prey on others, they forfeit their own right to exist. Veltar felt his bioluminescent patches dim with worry. Admiral, surely the Galactic Council should decide what action to take. The Galactic Council? Chen's voice carried a bitter edge. The same council that received your distress call and chose not to respond? The words hit Veltar like a physical blow. What do you mean? Admiral Chen activated a datapad. We intercepted communications between your ship and several galactic governments. The Altarian Federation marked your distress call as regrettable but unavoidable loss. The Centauri Trade Union logged it as acceptable casualties of deep space exploration. The Galactic Council itself classified your situation as beyond current response capabilities. Veltar's crystalline form began to shake. They heard us calling for help and decided we weren't worth saving. That's correct. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. Every major galactic power received your transmission. None of them even attempted a rescue mission. The implications crashed over Veltar like a wave. His people had always believed in the benevolence of galactic civilization. They had trusted that their fellow sentient beings would help them in times of need. That trust had been betrayed by everyone except the species that galactic civilization considered barely civilized monsters. Admiral, he said quietly, what are humans going to do about the scourge? We're going to find every nest, every ship, every spawning ground, and we're going to destroy them all. All of them? Every single one. Chen's voice was calm, but her eyes held the cold certainty of an apex predator. Captain, your people are scientists. You understand ecosystems. What happens when you introduce a new predator into an environment where the prey species have no natural defenses? Veltar thought about it. The prey species becomes extinct. Exactly. The scourge are an invasive species that is found in an environment full of civilized prey with no natural defenses. If we don't eliminate them, they'll eventually consume every peaceful species they encounter. Over the following days, Veltar observed human behavior more closely. He watched Marines training in combat techniques that looked like organized violence. He saw engineers designing weapons with the casual efficiency of craftsmen. He listened to conversations where humans discussed killing with the same matter-of-fact tone they used to discuss the weather. But he also saw Dr. Kim working 18-hour shifts to care for injured Zephyrians. He watched human crew members share their personal food rations with the survivors. He observed Admiral Chen personally ensuring that every rescued researcher had comfortable quarters and access to communication with their families. The humans were simultaneously the most violent and most caring species he had ever encountered. Captain, Admiral Chen said during one of their daily meetings, I need to ask you something important. We've been monitoring galactic communications. Several governments are expressing concern about human military actions in this sector. Veltar looked up from the datapad he had been studying. What kind of concerns? They're worried about humans using excessive force and destabilizing the region. Some are suggesting that our response to the scourge threat is inappropriate. Veltar felt his bioluminescent patches flare with anger. Inappropriate? You saved us when no one else would even try. That's not how they see it, Chen said grimly. To them, we're dangerous Deathworlders who responded to a minor piracy problem with overwhelming military force. Minor piracy problem? Veltar stood up, his crystalline form trembling with outrage. They called being eaten alive a minor piracy problem? Admiral Chen nodded. I'm afraid so. Captain, I need to ask you for a favor. We're going to be called before the Galactic Council to answer for our actions. Would you be willing to testify about what actually happened? Veltar looked around the human ship, thinking of his dead crew members and the 13 survivors who were alive, only because humans had ignored galactic opinion to save strangers. Admiral, he said firmly, it would be my honor. The Galactic Council chambers had not seen this level of tension in decades. Representatives from 47 different species filled the circular amphitheater, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes under the artificial lighting. At the center of it all stood Admiral Sarah Chen, looking remarkably calm for someone facing the combined disapproval of galactic civilization. Ambassador Thys of the Altarian Federation spoke first. His serpentine form coiled in obvious agitation. Admiral Chen, this council has received disturbing reports about human military actions in the outer spiral. You deployed over 200 warships in response to a simple piracy incident. Correction, Admiral Chen replied evenly. We deployed over 200 rescue vessels in response to a distress call from peaceful researchers being murdered by biological weapons. The Centauri Trade Union representative, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Economic Unit 7, pulsed with bioluminescent indignation. The humans have destabilized an entire sector with their aggressive response. Trade routes are being rerouted. Commercial vessels are afraid to enter the region. Good, Chen said simply. Maybe that will keep them alive long enough for us to finish exterminating the scourge. A collective gasp went through the chamber. Exterminating an entire species was considered an act of ultimate barbarity by most galactic civilizations. Counselor Vrex of the Geometric Collective spoke in perfectly modulated tones. Admiral, surely you understand that complete elimination of a species is ethically unacceptable. These scourge creatures could potentially be educated, relocated, or contained. Admiral Chen activated a holographic display. Counselor, I'd like to show you some footage from our recent operations. The hologram showed a human battleship approaching what looked like an asteroid. As they watched, the asteroid split open, revealing a massive organic interior filled with partially digested ships and their crews. The Scourge had been using it as a feeding ground. This is Scourge Nest Theta 7, Chen explained calmly. We found the remains of 43 different vessels inside, representing 12 different species. The Scourge had kept some of the crews alive for weeks, feeding on them slowly. Several council members made sounds of distress. A few actually left the chamber. We found evidence of similar nests throughout the sector, Chen continued, each one containing the remains of dozens of ships and thousands of sentient beings. Ambassador Thys recovered his composure first. While tragic, Admiral, this does not justify genocide. These creatures might be acting on instinct, not malice. Counselor Vrex is correct, agreed the representative from the Science Coalition, a tall insectoid called Click 9 Harmony. Perhaps the Scourge can be educated to understand that consuming sentient beings is wrong. Admiral Chen looked around the chamber, her expression unreadable. Honorable counselors, I have a question for you. When Captain Veltar sent his distress call, how many of your governments attempted a rescue mission? The silence stretched uncomfortably long. None, Chen answered her own question. 0. Not one government in this chamber even tried to save those researchers. The distance was too great, Ambassador Thys protested. The risk to our vessels was too high. Such losses are regrettable but unavoidable in deep space exploration. But not unavoidable, Chen said, because humans avoided them. We traveled the same distance, faced the same risks, and saved 13 lives that every government in this chamber had written off. She gestured to the viewing gallery, where Captain Veltar sat with the other survivors. Captain, would you please tell the Council what you observed about the Scourge during your encounter? Veltar stood, his crystalline form catching the chamber lights. Honored counselors, I spent 3 days hiding from the Scourge creatures. I monitored their communications and observed their behavior. They are not acting on instinct. They are intelligent, organized, and they take pleasure in the suffering of their victims. He activated his own display, showing intercepted Scourge communications. They discussed which of my crew members would taste better and which ones to save for later. They deliberately kept some people alive to prolong their feeding. This was not survival behavior. This was sadism. The chamber fell silent again. Several representatives looked sick. Moreover, Veltar continued, his voice growing stronger. When I contacted my government to report these events, I learned something disturbing. The Scourge have been attacking ships in this sector for over a year. Every government in this chamber has received reports of missing vessels and distress calls from victims. He looked around the chamber, his bioluminescent patches pulsing with emotion. Every government knew about the Scourge. Every government chose to classify the attacks as acceptable losses, rather than risk their own ships to stop them. Ambassador Thys shifted uncomfortably. Captain, you must understand that military intervention carries significant risks. But humans took those risks, Veltar interrupted. Humans sent mining ships and passenger liners to fight creatures that your warships wouldn't engage. They risked their lives to save people they had never met, from a species they barely knew existed. Economic Unit 7 pulsed rapidly. The humans have since launched a systematic extermination campaign across multiple star systems. This level of aggression cannot be tolerated. Admiral Chen nodded. You're absolutely right. We have eliminated every scourge nest we could find. 17 breeding colonies, 43 feeding stations, and over 200 individual bioships, all destroyed. This proves our point, Ambassador Thys declared. Such violence is unacceptable in civilized space. Civilized space? Admiral Chen's voice carried a dangerous edge. Counselor, let me tell you about civilized space. In the past 6 months, humans have responded to 47 distress calls from alien vessels. We've rescued crews from pirates, provided aid during natural disasters, and shared our technology freely with any species that asked. She looked around the chamber. How many distress calls have your governments responded to in the same period? The silence was deafening. None, Chen said again. Because you've all decided that helping others is too dangerous, too expensive, too inconvenient. You've created a galaxy where predators can operate freely because you're too civilized to stop them. Counselor Vrex spoke carefully. Admiral, what do humans want from this council? Nothing, Chen replied. We didn't ask for your permission to rescue those researchers, and we're not asking for your permission to protect this sector from similar threats. She stood up and walked toward the exit. But I want to make something very clear to all of you. Humans are no longer going to ignore distress calls just because they come from species that consider us too dangerous to associate with. When someone calls for help, we will respond. Ambassador Thys called after her. Admiral, you cannot simply appoint yourselves as galactic peacekeepers. Chen stopped at the door and turned back. Watch us. As the human delegation left the chamber, panicked conversations broke out among the remaining representatives. Some demanded immediate military action against human expansion. Others argued for negotiation and compromise. A few quietly began calculating how to ensure they would never need to send their own distress calls. In his seat in the viewing gallery, Captain Veltar watched the chaos with a mixture of satisfaction and worry. His people had always believed that civilization meant peace, cooperation, and mutual aid. Today he had learned that for most of the galaxy, civilization simply meant an agreement to ignore each other's suffering. The humans had shown them what real civilization looked like. It was terrifying, violent, and completely uncompromising in its protection of the innocent. As he left the chamber, Veltar made a mental note to update his species database entry for humans. They were no longer listed as barely civilized Deathworlders. They were now listed as highly dangerous allies. Do not threaten their friends. Outside the council building, Admiral Chen was approached by reporters from various galactic news networks. The questions came rapidly. Would humans withdraw from alien space? Would they respect galactic law? Would they limit their military expansion? Chen listened patiently, then gave her response. Humans will continue to respond to any distress call from any species that needs help. We will continue to eliminate threats to peaceful spacefaring peoples, and we will continue to exist in this galaxy whether you approve or not. She looked directly into the cameras. To any species listening to this broadcast, if you are in trouble, if you need help, if someone is threatening your people, call us. Humans respond to distress calls. As the human delegation departed, leaving behind a very disturbed galactic council, one fact became clear to everyone watching. The galaxy had gained new neighbors, and these neighbors had very firm opinions about how civilized beings should treat each other. The age of ignoring other people's suffering, because it was inconvenient, had ended. Whether the galaxy wanted it or not, humanity was now involved in everyone's problems.